Another question that we received was about on the topic of enculturation. And specifically, it was speaking about the Irish church. And the press seems to be encouraging a kind of enculturation that blends Celtic traditions, which include paganism, with Catholicism. And I'm wondering if you could speak to this phenomenon in particular, if not in particular, the push for enculturation in general and in the church as it's playing out in various places around the world. Amazonia is one example, obviously. And how do we discern what is good and not good in this? And how big of a problem is it? Is it even that big of a problem? What do you think?
Well, I think there was a lot of enculturation from the very beginning in the Irish church. I think there were elements of that. You go to a church in Ireland, and there are just elements of kind of the Celtic past that I think really shine through.
Mhm.
Look, enculturation is a very difficult thing. Let's recognize that to begin with. I think the whole Pachamama debacle in Rome was a disaster. That image should not have been used on Vatican grounds. It should certainly not have been in churches there. This is a pagan goddess. I mean, let's just say this outright. It is a goddess of fertility and some other things in various South American cultures. That's the kind of thing that you confront early on in a period of missionary work. So, for example, Our Lady of Guadalupe has many features that resemble those of an indigenous woman of that period, but also mixed with something that comes from the outside as well. The early North American martyrs, they just celebrated their feast day a couple of weeks ago, the Jesuits, Marquette, and others who came to the New World. They had to look at native cultures and say, how do I explain baptism? Is there something about water in this culture that I can begin to talk about with them? Now that's all fine. I mean, that it seems to me is the way our Lord actually spoke, even to the Jews. He had to teach them something new while still affirming what their culture and what their past had been. Where I start to get very nervous is we know that in the modern world, there are pagan resurgences, I would call them. We don't use the names of Zeus and Venus and whatnot, but we know there's a kind of a sexual goddess emerging who is being worshipped in many advanced cultures. We know that there's a kind of a worship of mammon, of just sheer wealth, of power, etc. And so when we talk about these things in the developed world, I think we've been through that already. Anyway, I'm all for opening up to looking more carefully at nature. I wrote a whole book about religion and environmentalism. I think that the church has something to say that's of use about environmentalism. But when we take our main energies from outside instead of from within our tradition and from Christ himself, frankly, then I think we're skirting very close to playing with fire in terms of paganism, of worshiping false idols. The whole energy has got to be to move people from those partial truths, because there are partial truths in paganism. And this happened in the ancient world, the Greco-Roman world. We have to move them from that. The traffic has to move in the direction of the church. The church can't even appear to be supine sort of toward these external cultural manifestations, which ultimately are not really fully concordant with the gospel.